Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Track. My name is Patrick Akil, and I'm joined here by Michael and João. And we're going to kick it off with their talk Fantastic Biases and Where to Find Them in Software Development. Really love the title. Looking forward to the talk. Have fun, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll kick it off, Michael. Hello, everyone. This is our talk, Fantastic Biases and Where to Find Them in Software Development. Can you please, So
That's me.
this is Mika Kutz. Go ahead.
Okay, you want to do my introduction? That would be fun. I'm Michael Kutz, or you can call me Michael. I'm working for Rewe Digital in Cologne, in Germany, and I'm a software quality engineer and ambassador at my company. And somehow the slides are lacking a lot. Okay, and so now you can see stuff. I coach teams to make less mistakes. I try to learn from them what their typical mistakes are and try to transfer those solutions to other teams. I also maintain some libraries and scripts to help with not making too many mistakes. And I deeply believe that we need to not control what people put out, but rather improve their education and their general setups so they can strive with great work. And I'm pretty fond of Harry Potter stuff, so the title and the slides, I came up with that. And João needs to play along. And this is João.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm João Proença. I am from Lisbon, Portugal, and I work for a company called Ada Health. I am a quality engineer with a passion for a lot of different things like testing, CI/CD, observability, DevOps, risk assessment, you name it. Over the past year, I've been working a lot on automation, especially, but even though a lot of times I'm involved in the tech-related stuff from engineering, I believe that a lot of the team's problems usually have to be solved at human level rather than at the tech level. Hence why I am interested, as well as Mikhail, on these topics of behavioral psychology and biases and how they affect us as software engineers. Move along, Mikhail, please. And so today we are here to talk to you about cognitive biases, which is something that Mikhail and I have studied and delivered content on for the past 3 years, 2 years, something like that. Yes. And before we proceed, what exactly is a cognitive bias? Well, the definition is that it's a systematic pattern or deviation from norm or rationality in judgment. Essentially, the person that coined this idea of a cognitive bias was Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in the field of economics for this sort of work. And he basically describes that we as human beings have kind of like two systems of functioning in our brains. There's a system one, which is really low energy, really fast, that allows you to make quick automatic decisions. Imagine that you're driving your car in the freeway and if you've driven a car for a while, you're not actively thinking about your driving. You're actually thinking about the TV show you saw yesterday or something like that, because system one is kicking in and you're doing a lot of things in an automatic way. System one is low energy. It's really fundamental for the way we function as human beings. It uses a lot of heuristics, but because of those heuristics, sometimes it can fail and make poor judgment decisions. And that's where cognitive biases kick in. We also have what we call system two, which is a far, let's say, more high energy, more precise. You're using your rationality much more. You're not depending on heuristics, you can make more precise, well thought decisions, but you cannot depend on that sort of functioning in your brain the whole day. Otherwise, you wouldn't have energy to function 24 hours. And using the same freeway example, when you started taking driving lessons and you got on the freeway, you were driving completely using system 2, because you were thinking, okay, do I have the right gear put in? Am I going too fast? You were paying a lot of attention to the things that you were doing. And so that's the key difference between these two systems. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. So why do we need to talk about this? Well, the problem with cognitive biases is that they lead us depending on system 1 and having the biases at play, they lead us to irrational judgment and thinking, which sometimes makes us do wrong decisions or unfair decisions, let's say. We as software engineers, regardless of if I'm a quality engineer or a developer or whatnot, we do a lot of decisions over every day over our careers, and we should be objective and rational, but a lot of times biases stand in the way of that. Mikhail, do you want to add something? Or
no, not this time.
Cool. Awesome.
So this is the place that we're going to discover today. It's the haunted castle of software development. As you can see, we have a lot of rooms that you might have been into yourselves. For example, the Grand Hall of Product Planning, the Daily Tower, the Dungeon of Incidents, or the Room of Retrospective. In several of these rooms, we will find some biases haunting the places, influencing what we do in those rooms. And some of them will reveal themselves today, some will not. There are a lot of these biases in here. It's pretty crowded, actually, but we don't have the time to encounter them all, of course. So let's kick it off in the Grand Hall of Product Planning, where we actually think about what we want to do with our wizard chip and how we want to achieve it and what's important for our customers, for example. And here we encounter our first bias, and that's the false consensus. The false consensus makes us assume that personal qualities, characteristics, beliefs, actions, abilities are relatively widespread. And this is especially dangerous to wizards like us. We do a lot of things every day nobody else does, ever. Like most people above a certain age, they will probably not use a PC every day. They might use a smartphone or something, but even that's not a given, I think. So we need to be careful about where our abilities become a false consensus. A typical phrase that some people use, and it actually happened to me when we gave the talk the first time, like 3 slides later, everybody can do, knows, does that. So whenever you hear that phrase, either out of your own mouth or out of the mouth of your product owner, for example, that's probably a false consensus taking place. So what are the effects of this? Well, we have an idea how we implement a certain feature, and we expect it to work because everybody can, right? And that might not be true. So that's really dangerous in the stage of product planning to fall for false consensus. Another effect is that we don't realize that the person we're discussing with right now does believe in some other false consensuses. So you assume the person understands what you're talking about when you're talking about rest assured, for example, to use for your testing, and that person is actually thinking about something in Selenium. I don't know. So that's also a quite common effect of the false consensus. Now, what can we do about this? Are there any counterspells in the book? Well, there are. First of all, the likeliness of having a false consensus without noticing is countered very well by having diverse teams. And by diverse, I don't mean only like gender, skin color, but rather culture, educational background,
disabilities.
Disabilities is also extremely important. Yeah, to have somebody around who knows what it feels like to be, for example, blind or having bad hearing. Or once I had a teammate who was, well, it's not actually the correct term, but colorblind. So he wasn't able to sense the difference between colors. And so that was a great help to verify our designs. Another counterspell is to, well, simply verify your assumptions. Whenever you think, oh, that's actually an assumption that we're making here, find a way to verify that with actual customers, actual users of your software, or just get data from any public source that might be available. Sometimes there are, sometimes not. And the third counterspell, and this is really key, is like you need to make your assumptions explicit. Like we are assuming this and that. There are several techniques while you're planning, like visualize things, don't assume things to be understood by everybody. So that's something that I got to do a lot. Like we're discussing heated, and I just get up and start drawing a picture and ask the discussants, are we talking about this or are we talking about that? So that helps a great deal to prevent that talking cross purposes with others. Okay, so we're leaving the grand hall of product planning already, even though I'm pretty sure that we will bump into a lot of other nasty biases there. And we're going into the hall of recruiting.
Exactly. And here we will find the dreaded affinity bias. And the affinity bias is basically something that tells us that we have a tendency to gravitate toward people like ourselves in appearance, beliefs, or background. And we may even, in some situations, avoid or even dislike people who are different from us, even if we don't realize it. This is not kind of like a character trait. This is just the way we are hardwired. I mean, back in the day when we were primitive beings evolving into what we now know as human beings, this way of operating was probably beneficial for us in our development. But nowadays we kind of have this curse where even when sometimes we don't realize it, we tend to agree more with and align ourselves more with people that come from the same place as we are, that look like us, or have the same sorts of beliefs. But that can be detrimental. Okay. So one of the problems with this in software engineering is, of course, creativity. If you have really homogeneous teams in the sense that everyone looks the same, everyone's is the same age, everyone has the same education, everyone, it's all men. For instance, usually you don't get a lot of creativity whenever you need to bring it up. There's already been a lot of studies that tells us that a group made up of diverse teams tends to be more creative, or to have more, let's say, creative richness amongst them than a group that is not that diverse. Next effect. This, of course, leads to poor team performance, not just the creativity part, but other things. There have been a lot of studies that have told us as well that there is a correlation between high-performing teams and diversity in those teams. Doesn't mean that you need that diversity immediately makes a team better performance, but it does get that team into a good chance of achieving high performance. And I think this is a very, very interesting effect that has been proven. There's even data to back it up, because a lot of times when you talk about diversity in tech and whatnot, you see some leaders who will say, I believe in diversity, I think it's something that we should push for, but at the end of the day, I have a business to run, and sometimes it's not a priority. When actually this is kind of a fallacy, because if you have a business to run, you want to have high performing teams. So guess what? You should invest in diversity. Diversity is not just the right thing to do; it's actually good for business. Next one, Mikhail. And so how can we counterspell all of these things? So one of the way, of course, that one of the ways affinity biases, the bias also impacts software engineering is in our recruiting processes. It's very easy for us to have a recruitment process that caters for the affinity bias, in the sense of we don't realize it, but we're actually recruiting people that look like us and behave like us and have the same background, when that's actually detrimental for the diversity in our organization and the benefits that you get from that diversity. And the way to counter that, of course, is first by trying to do blind recruiting as much as possible, like setting aside certain irrelevant traits about someone, like what do they look like or how old they are and whatnot, when we are evaluating them from a recruitment point of view. There's another counterspell also about the way you attract people that you are recruiting. I've seen situations where it's like, hey, we're trying to hire people that are different from us in our org, but it's really hard because no one applies. But then when you go and see exactly when how the company is presenting itself to the world, hey, it's a bunch of white dudes. You have YouTube videos, it's always a white man that's speaking. You go to the website, you have a lot of examples of white leaders from the companies writing or speaking. So if a person that is not a white man is looking at all of these contents, and they will automatically feel, hey, this is probably not the place for me. So if you want to increase diversity inside of your organization, you should think about the way you are presenting the org to the outside, but also you should also target specific groups with the way you advertise for your positions. Like, I want to, if I'm paying for advertisements around this specific position, let's try and get those in front of the people that we're trying to attract as candidates, and then get a fair chance for everyone along the recruitment pipeline. Okay, next one. So the diverse role models, which I've spoken about, and I think there's a fourth card. And finally, and we're talking a lot about recruitment because this highly influences the fact that you have ORDA, diverse teams. The way the recruitment pipeline and the recruitment process is done, you can also tweak it in a way that counters affinity bias. Having clear and objective criteria for evaluating candidates is very important for that. I've interviewed a lot of people in my career, and I remember being in situations where it was basically, okay, so we're going to interview person X, just go in there, ask whatever you want to ask, and then get us feedback at the end. Whereas some other times I've been given a roster like, we're looking for people with with these abilities. Where we want them to align with our culture, and so let's pay attention to these things and these other things. And when these criteria are much more clear up front, and then you evaluate the person along those, it's far easier to not fall prey to the affinity bias, because you're making an opinion based on objective stuff rather than just an opinion on, did I like this person or not, given all the ambiguity I went into that interview. So, Mikhail.
We have one remark in the chat from Tatiana about interviews doesn't work that well with people with speech issues.
Yes.
That's not her exact wording, impediments. Yeah, that's right. But I think if you implement these in the early stages of recruiting, when you pick CVs or something, then this can still work. So I think that's a good idea. Still, but well. Okay, so we're leaving the hall of recruiting and we're entering the daily tower where we talk about what we're supposed to do, what's standing in our way of doing it, and what keeps us from doing it. And here we have the malicious present bias. Present bias is basically, and it's also connected to hyperbolic discounting, so I can look that up. It's basically, I have this huge task, but I could also clean my windows. Like, I need to write that blog post. Like, that's totally me. But I could also tidy up my room and stuff like that. And that's basically, we overvalue present rewards. Like, well, if I clean those windows, I can actually see outside more clearly, and disregard long-term consequences. Like, if I don't finish this blog post, I will not get paid by that publisher, for example. You might know this effect as well, like how many times did you do that particular recurring New Year's resolution? Put whatever you like to change in your life. A pile of great books is sitting on my nightstand, waiting for them to be read. So someday I'll do, but I think buying those books is already counting somehow. And well, the effect of that is pretty popularly called procrastination. I just never get started with something. And in the work context, it's often those high effort solutions that we know we should do, but we just don't start them because it's like, this will take us so long, and we will be distracted by something else, like that big refactoring we should do in our code base. We should really tidy up those test data because they're getting in our way all the time. And then the complex automation project that we should get going, because doing that manually always eats up half of the sprint or something like that. So there's a lot of effects of the present bias. So what can we do about it? Well, it was funny to me when I got to learn a lot about these biases. I found, those agile frameworks that we're applying more or less blindly all this time, they have some actual counters already built in. Like when you have your commitment at the beginning of a sprint and the task breakdown at the beginning of your sprint, that's actually countering present bias pretty well, because you said in 2 weeks' time, in 1 week's time, whatever, we will be finished with this. And if you think, we can't finish that in 2 weeks, then you split it down into smaller goals. And that's another great counterspell here. So one is publicly committing to doing it. So it's not that easy to weasel back from it. And the other thing is, if you have a huge task, break it down in small tasks, getting some rewards on the way for having that small broken down task done. And another thing is making delaying really hard or embarrassing and doing it really easy. That's also referred to in Flow, in the book Flow. That's basically, for example, you want to do a run every day, just lay out your running gear before you go to bed. Because when you now get up, you see that running gear. And not going for a run, well, then you would stuff that stuff back into your closet, which is kind of embarrassing and extra work. And so, oh my God, yeah, okay, I'll do it anyway. So this might work. It's small things that keep us from doing the right thing sometimes. So we're leaving the Daily Tower, and we are heading back to the Chamber of
Refinement. And here we will find a pretty well-known bias called the anchor effect. And the anchor effect basically is a strong dependency on an initial piece of information, which we call the anchor, to make subsequent judgments. It happens a lot whenever you go to the supermarket and you see a discount. It's like, this was 50 euros and now it's 30 euros. And you think, that's a great deal. Well, it kind of depends if it was actually 50 euros before. You're already depending your judgment on the fact that you were given a very high cost for it at the beginning. And it has been proven that having these anchors in our conversations and in our negotiations highly impacts the way we decide about those events. Okay. So one of the things that happens is that it can lead us, if the way people communicate with each other, it can lead us to poor estimates. So if you are doing estimates in the Chamber of Refinement with your team, one very, let's say, dangerous situation is when you have someone, for instance, a lead developer in the team that says, I think this story is worth 5 story points, but I want to know what the rest of the team has to say. Once that number gets put on the table, it has already majorly influenced the rest of the discussion. So you should avoid those situations as much as possible. Another effect is the way we search for information. So a lot of times in tech, we use surveys because we want to get data from our employees, or we want to get data from our users, or whatever. And the way we set up that data, the way you frame a question, just as I've exampled with the estimation situation, can also influence the way you are getting your data and even the conclusions you get from those surveys and that data. And another effect that we also have is, of course, in negotiations, which can become really uneven. And if you think about it, we tend to think about negotiations as something that's more related with sales, but we all are involved in negotiations in our careers, in our daily lives, either because you are negotiating a new contract with a new company, or because you're negotiating a pay rise with your own company, or you're negotiating with your own bank. Or maybe you are even negotiating between teams on things that one team can do and the other things that the other team can do, how far we can go. It's very important, and sales people know all about the anchor effect, that putting an anchor out there has a high impact on the way the conversation goes. Sometimes you can even use it for your own advantage, because you know that if you set an anchor that's really beneficial for yourself, you're already influencing the conversation in a way that gets you what you actually want. So how can we counter this? For things like estimations, we can use techniques like poker planning, where essentially people select out of when they're estimating, they can select a specific card that has a specific number of story points that they want to vote, and then everyone shows the cards all at the same time, so that no one is showing cards before anyone has done the decision. Another counterspell we can apply is delaying our decision and searching for data. So if you are aware of the anchor effect and you try to identify that, hey, actually in this conversation, I've been given an anchor while I'm supposed to decide on something, I'm going to delay that decision, and I'm going to search for the data and try to anchor myself on that data rather than the anchor that I was given. For instance, if you're using the supermarket analogy, if you're at the supermarket and it's like, oh, this product is now 30 euros, but it used to be 50. Okay, let me check online if actually it's sold for 50 euros at other places. And then another counterspell is visualizing your data. Because with the anchor effect, it's a lot of times the anchor effect, the anchor could be not just a number that someone throws out, but also an average number that someone gives you. And averages sometimes hide a lot of details that are really important for your decision making. So if you visualize the data when you're doing these decisions, you get a better feel of how exactly the data is spread out so that you can do a better decision. Yeah.
Right, so let's get out of the chamber of refinement and get into the grand hall of review, where we're supposed to celebrate our great successes and think about and present it to our customers, and maybe sometimes through the passage of feedback we will get some valuable information. And here, this bias is lurking in a lot of places, and it comes in very different forms and shapes, but I think it's especially cozy in the grand hall of review. So, groupthink is a strong desire for harmony, which isn't that bad, right? When we want to have a harmonious group, that's understandable. But it creates a tendency to agree with the majority at all costs. So that sounds abstract. So here are some ways this will play out over time. So first of all, you will feel like or have the illusion of invulnerability. So you as a group, you're awesome. You rock. You do the right thing at the right time in the right way all the time. You're really, you're rocking. That's cool. That's good. I've been there, being in awesome teams all the time. Next, you will stop questioning your morality. Like, this group's so awesome, we can't be. I mean, if we want to do it, it can't be really wrong. It must be awesome.
Because you rock.
Sorry?
Because you rock.
Yeah, right? QED. Next, you will maybe tend to rationalize warnings or inquiries from the outside. So somebody approaches you and says, well, that thing that you've done there, I didn't like that. I think that was harmful to some other aspect of the company. And you say, well, are they? They don't get what we do here. They don't get what we approach here. So yeah, they are just stupid, or even they are evil. They envy our success. So that's why they are complaining, of course. And well, that's all like external blocking, I'd say. But think about the effects that harmonious group will have on yourself at some point. So at some point, somebody will pitch an idea that's really bad. You don't like it. You don't want to do that. But, well, all the others think it's a great idea. So would you speak up at that situation? I don't know. Not if that's a long-going team and you always agree on everything and you don't want to ruin that, harmonious situation. And then that person who actually pitched that idea will get the idea, oh, that's an anonymity. You can read the word. I can't spell it. So you think, yeah, everybody agrees, so it must be a great idea, which leads to even worse ideas. So you get into a spiral of bad ideas. And then eventually you will feel the pressure to conform with whatever idea comes up in the group. So this is how this plays out. It's a bit complex, but I personally, I think I could totally relate to that spiral. I mean, I didn't play it out to the end all the time, but there were times when we actually ignored feedback from the outside pretty much and trivialized what people were thinking about our work. So the effect, of course, is that we are ruthless. We're doing harmful things and doing dysfunctional decisions because we don't even hear the feedback from within the group and ignore the one that's coming from without the group. So our decisions can't be that great at a point. And that's the main thing that's happening here. But if you think about it, that's a lot of effects that play out. It's yeah, I mean, you will end up as the evil empire eventually. What can help? Again, so this is why the affinity bias is so terrible, because you will end up in a group that's totally vulnerable to groupthink when you're really homogeneous, when you're all the same education and so on. So building diverse teams and having some constant fluctuations even can help a lot to break up groupthink, like having some interns from time to time, taking on new teammates, spilling out old ones, like, hey, it's been a good time, but you should travel, you should travel some teams to see more things. So breaking up the team, even though you might think, well, that's a great team, we shouldn't break that up. Well, maybe you should actually. Another technique that helps a lot in those discussions where you think, maybe so it seems everybody agrees with an idea. When you encounter that situation, you might want to try the 1-to-4 liberating structure, which basically says, okay, each person gets to know the matter, making up a decision on their own, then they get together with another person, discuss those ideas, and then you get with another pair, discuss it again, and then you share it with the whole group. This makes the one person who disagrees a lot more visible usually, because at least one other person who just has one other opinion needs to weigh that opinion against their own. And fun thing, but actually not that easy to do, is assign a devil's advocate. Assign somebody who has to disagree with all reasonable arguments that there are. This can be actually fun, I think. Assign somebody who always disagrees with arguments, of course. Okay, so we're leaving Grand Hall of Review and we're heading for the final room, I think, and that's a room of retrospective.
Retros. And here is where the availability bias comes into place, which is one I find very, very interesting. The availability bias is a mental shortcut that relies on immediate examples that come to mind when evaluating the frequency or probability of something, okay? So a good example of this is the way we estimate how likely certain things are. I mean, whenever there is a plane crash, you hear about it in the news. No matter where, if it happens on the other part of the globe, you'll probably see a piece of news on your country telling you about that plane crash. And so we all have a tendency to believe that plane crashes happen from time to time, and it's a risk that we all go through. But actually, science data and statistics has shown us that you are much more likely to be involved in a fatal automobile crash on the way to the airport than dying from taking a flight to another country. And this is because of the availability bias. The number of examples you are given about something kind of like kick off a process inside your brain that tell you how likely is this thing or not, or how frequent it is. And how does this affect us? Well, especially when we're in retros, or even when we are planning stuff, for instance, we have a tendency to focus too much on recent events to set priorities. I have lost count of the number of times I've seen this panning out. Like, you have a big incident that happens in production, like half of the company comes together to deal with that thing because it was really serious, but then no one stopped. And then when you go into a post-mortem and a retro and planning what's up ahead, everyone's thinking about that recent incident that was so painful, and they're saying, we gotta put this as our top priority because this can never happen again. And of course, that dealing with incidents like that is healthy, but you should have a a good idea, or a precise idea of what is the priority of dealing with that. And what I mean by this is that maybe you had an incident because something that is really, really unlikely but highly impactful happened, which also tells you that it's unlikely for it to happen again. Yeah, sure, you should deal with it, but it doesn't have to be your top priority right now. And this tends to happen a lot when you are planning for the next sprint and whatnot. Next effect. Another thing is a wrong perception of a software's quality and value. In my career, I've assumed various different roles, and I've been a part of a customer support team at some point for a product software company. And you know what is the team that is the most biased to assess the quality of the software? It's actually that team, because they're always getting the complaints that are coming and the feedback and the negative feedback that is coming from their users. So they believe that the quality is much lower than it really is, because they are highly exposed to the situations where the software is not performing as we expect it to be. But they're not also exposed to all of the situations where the quality is actually working really well and people are happy with it. So you should always take into account the availability bias given each profile in each role's context. Also, privileged sources of data. And I've seen this happening also in my career in different organizations, where it's very easy for, as an organization is growing, to have specific customers that are, let's say, privileged. Privileged in the sense, maybe it was your first customer, and so you've developed a long-standing relationship with that customer. Maybe it's a customer that sits next door. They're just next door or next building, so it's really easy for you to communicate with them. You have a lot of meetings on-prem with them, and so there's much more communication going on with that specific customer. That customer becomes a privileged source of data, a more enriching source of data, and you start thinking that it represents the general population far more than it does. So we should take these privileged sources of data with a grain of salt. We should be careful about how they can influence our own estimations of the probability of things.
Okay. I want to fix the bug for the CEO's wife.
There you go. So how can you counter these effects? Well, the first one is go beyond the examples. If you see something that's being decided because, remember that thing that has been happening recently, or, hey, we've seen 3 instances of this lately, so this is really important. Whenever you see something being decided on the grounds of having a lot of examples around, try to go beyond those examples. Get the data. It's like, we believe that this is a frequent event, but let's look at the data just to be sure that that's in fact true. Or if there's something which is kind of like a little more silent, that it's happening a lot. Next one. Oh, and these are also. Yeah. 3 questions to ask about the examples when you see them. Are they recent? Are they extreme? And are they negative? Because usually that tells you you're falling prey to the availability bias. Next one. Check the data, as I said, and I think that's it. Right?
That's it, right. You might have spotted these 2 books, Thinking Fast and Slow. Some folks in the chat already revealed themselves as big fans. There's also the book by David McRanley where he goes over a lot of biases. That's a little more lighter read than Thinking Fast and Slow, I think. And it's also quite humorous. Took out some jokes from there. You're Not So Smart is always a good thing to consider. Yeah. So those are our two books that we took for this talk. And I think we have no more time for question. I don't know, Patrick?
You're muted, I think. I can't hear Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick, you came off a bit, but now you're silenced. Okay. I will just check the questions that I got from Patrick in the chat. So where can you get a shirt like mine? That's Agile Testing Days 2019. So we will need a time machine. Sorry. And the other question is, what about don't change the winning team idea works against the healthy fluctuation? How to break it? Yeah, basically I'd say be aware of effects like groupthink. Groupthink is really
I would also.
malicious.
Sometimes you don't have to change a winning team. You can just have them navigate to another team for a while, but it's temporary and they come back. Sometimes that's enough to break the thing with groupthink.
Yeah.
All right. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Now we can
perfect.
hear you.
I had to rejoin. I love the presentation, guys. I love that you shared the link as well. If for the people that missed it, it's in the chat. Check it out. Reach out to them on Twitter. There's a link in the presentation as well. And we're going to round it off here. Thank you, João. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Bye.